law enforcement and legal expertise here. Our friend Paul Mauro is back, former NYPD inspector. He's an attorney as well, founder of opsdesk.org and a Fox News contributor. Inspector Mauro, great to have you back on the show, sir.
Great to be with you guys.
All right, so I know it's early stages. You might have heard a little bit of what we were talking about before with the Sean Combs trial. A lot of really grotesque stuff, salacious stuff that is considered, I think, a matter of fact and public record now on both sides. But is it going to be able to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt that it is criminal? What are you seeing so far? How are you viewing the likelihood of, well, whichever outcome here in this trial?
So what I'm seeing is the prosecutor's strategy, right? And it's way, way too early, I would argue, to be able to come to some sort of a conclusion as to the likelihood of his conviction. What the prosecution very clearly is doing is establishing right up front that, as you guys put it, not a good guy, okay? And that the acts involved here are horrific. That in and of itself, however, does not supply enough beyond a reasonable doubt for a conviction. But by establishing that right up from the get-go, first of all, you color the perceptions of the jury going forward in regard to everything here. That's kind of going on in the Karen Reed case as well, by the way. But you got to remember something. The charges here, he's the only guy charged. And you have a RICO allegation here, along with some other charges. And that means that there are other members of the organization, and they were not charged, which means almost certainly there's some flips coming. And that is to say, people that are members of this organization who are going to come in and they're going to button up, in the prosecution's mind, they're going to button up the piece that you guys are saying is potentially missing. And I'm not disagreeing with you. We just haven't gotten to it yet. You're going to have testimony, I would argue, where they are going to put forth the idea that he had an organization, that it was coercive, and then there's all this other stuff marbled throughout it, including guns, drugs, physical assaults. There's even some allegations of arson. It's going to get very, very volatile, very lurid. And that's where they're going to put their meat on the bones of the indictment as it's written.
Why do you think they started with Cassie, his girlfriend? She is the first witness bringing the case. Because to me, that is the most salacious, but it actually, and I'm curious how you would analyze this, is one that he might have the best defense for because she was with him for a decade. And if you truly felt like you were being mistreated, I think most people, right? I think most people out there, if they were in a decade-long relationship and you kept in that relationship, a lot of people would say, hey, she had to have consented to a lot of this. She wasn't necessarily coerced, right? To me, starting with this actually offers him the best defense. Whereas if they had started with, hey, let me get into some of the particulars of what we think were criminal behavior, maybe by people who were his former colleagues, former coworkers, people that he employed, it actually looks more like a clinical crime than a broken relationship clearly between a guy and a girlfriend.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very smart observation because you're right. That is very much the dynamic in this. And we've seen that from the get-go because notice that Combs's defense, okay, who is Mark Ignifilo, by the way, a very, very competent and experienced attorney. His wife, Karen Ignifilo, is actually the defense attorney for the Mangione case. She's got Mangione. So they're well known here in New York City criminal circles. They both work for the Manhattan DA's office, probably around when you were there, Buck, with us in New York. But
Oh,
that's
yeah.
it. Yeah, so they've been around and they know he's a very competent attorney. He's had a lot of high-profile cases, so he's got very good representation here. But what he's done, Clay, is what the prosecution has done. Excuse me, which is a two female prosecutors are the heart of the team. One of whom, by the way, is the daughter of James Comey. That James Comey, his daughter is one of the prosecutors. So this stuff is all very New York at this point. But one of the things they're going to do now is to confront the dynamic, Clay, that you're talking about subsequent to Cassie. And as I said, what they did up front is just put the black hat on Combs. They made him a bad guy to the point that even his defense had to say, hey, you know what? He is a bad guy. He's a domestic abuser, but that doesn't make him a RICO perp. That doesn't make him a sex trafficker, right? They're trying to draw that distinction. So now everything is going to be colored by that. But the question you pose is now what the prosecution has to overcome, which is, was it simply transactional? Was Cassie hanging around when she had ample opportunity to get away? Was she hanging around because she was getting something out of it and this whole thing was kind of consensual, which is going to be the defense? And that occurs, that dynamic occurs in all these cases. We saw it in Epstein and we saw it in Weinstein. In the Harvey
Yeah.
Weinstein case, you had a similar thing, right? Like, it was all transactional and they knew what they were getting into. And this comes down to a little bit of the evolution of America's sort of perception of these things. You're seeing it in the Menendez case, where the argument is, and it's been a winning argument so far to my shock, that we have progressed over the decades in our understanding of certain dynamics in these things. And as a result, we understand them better and we have to treat them differently. And so it's going to come down to exactly, I think, what you have put on the table, which is how much the other members of Combs's organization, because I'm telling you, that's who's coming here, because it's a RICO, right? There's going to be other members of the organization. They're not charged. So where is everybody? They're coming on the prosecution's case, and they're going to have to say he had control of her. She didn't have independent will. He threatened her. He beat her up. She didn't feel like she could leave. And you're going to have all kinds of other allegations about how he controlled this organization. And that's going to be where the rubber hits the road.
Well, Paul, this goes to my next question for you, which my understanding here, and this was from early on in the case, and I checked to make sure, they already know that they found illegal drugs, the quote, large quantities of cocaine and meth, and illegal firearms. That's actually something I do know quite a bit about, because if you've got illegal it was down here in Florida. It was actually in Miami, is where I live. And I think he had the serial numbers filed off on some AR-15s, a big no-no. Now, this comes up in the RICO case, but if they've got him on those, can they just get him separately on those illegal possession charges? And I ask because also to me it indicates they must think they've got something really good on him, right? Because back in the day, if they can get him on the illegal drugs and illegal guns, why not just put him away for years on that? They must think that they can prove this conspiracy at a higher level.
Yeah, another smart question. So understand something. He's got other charges. Everybody is focusing on the RICO charge because that's the thing that tracks to like the mafia, Gravano, Flip, Dungatti. We've all heard those stories. But there are other charges here. I'm going to point one of them out. One of them is that there isn't a gun charge here in the superseding indictment. There is a drug charge, however. All right. He's got a drug distribution charge. So there is that. And that's recent because that's when the HSI did the raid, right? He's also got an obstruction charge, and that almost certainly goes to the 2016 thing where he tells Izzy Flores, the manager, don't do anything with this tape. You got to cover up this tape. Somehow or other, they brought the statute on that forward. I'd be curious to see how they do that. But relative to these other charges that adhere, those remain on the table as an option for him. And, the one that's actually more serious than the RICO is the sex trafficking case. Because, and here's why, and this is the thing I want to tease out. This is Title 18 USC 1591. Anybody can look it up. It sounds very lawyerly. Just look those numbers up. This is sex trafficking of a minor. And that's trouble for him because that carries life. And the statute of limitations on that extends
sorry to cut
back.
you off on that. Who is the minor? Do we know anything about that?
No, I don't. And that's not going to, a very good chance you're not going to hear that name because obviously it's a minor. So we may hear in some vague terms, and I don't know if the person is going to testify, but 1591, which nobody's really talking about it. I looked for this interview. I had a lot of the same questions you guys do. So I started looking into the actual indictment. I pulled down the PDF as opposed to talking about it off of People magazine. And I see that it jumps right out of me. So who's this
Yeah,
who's
no
this
kidding. I
minor
didn't
that's in
know
the
that.
mix? So there you go.
Let me ask you this. 8 men, 4 women on the jury. Am
Correct.
I a awful, and the answer may be very much yes, awful, sexist, chauvinist? If I'm Diddy, I want as many men on this trial as I can get because I think guys are more likely in New York City to look at this and be like, hey, these women are getting on these planes. They're consenting to travel all over the world to go to Diddy parties. They weren't just getting flown around for free. They understood that, again, this is what I'm arguing if I'm the defense attorney. Do you think that the fact that he got 8 men, knowing that he only needs 1 to refuse to convict, right, to say, hey, this is reasonable doubt, if you were the defense attorney, would you want more men on this jury than women? Do you think that draw is better for him?
Yeah, I mean, look, that probably makes me an awful, terrible, horrible, sexist person as well, but it also means that we're both living in the real world, right? And yeah,
Yeah.
the answer would be yes, of course. Now, that said, as I said earlier, the understanding of these sorts of things have very much evolved. And I don't think there's any denying that as a society, we appreciate the control that an abuser can have over the abused. And our understanding of that dynamic has come a long, long way. So, it's a very blanket statement, and we have to be careful with how we frame that. But yeah, of course, because women are just going to be more understanding of that situation. They may have experienced themselves, and not, it's not always men controlling women. It can be the reverse, but let's speak factually. Generally, it is especially when it's physical. It's men over women. This goes almost to the argument of men and women's sports. Men just have stronger bodies in a general sense, and blah blah blah. You guys know this. So, yeah, you're thinking in terms of men who are going to look at this thing and say to themselves, this was transactional. Cassie, so far anyway, is the main witness here, and she stayed with him for 11 years. How is that possible? There must have been a point where she could have gotten out of the limo, run into the police station, and spoken her piece. And she didn't do that until years later when she decides to file a civil suit, which carries a monetary imperative, right? There's a motive embedded in that she's going to get paid. And, not coincidentally, her records, her music wasn't exactly number one at that point. So there's going to be this implication that she did it for money, and ultimately she got what she wanted. He settled the day after, as you guys said. So yeah, and it just comes down to whether the jury buys it. And there's also the reverse. Some of the men may feel like, you know what, I got to make sure that I don't come across as the guy you're talking about, Clay. And so maybe they're going to lean more into being protective of a woman like
Let me ask
Cassie
you
and
this.
others. So we'll see.
Let me ask you this, Paul, because you hit on it. He settled this case one day after the civil suit was filed.
Yeah.
Leave aside the criminal. The only reason he's getting charged criminally is because that civil case went public. He settled it for reportedly 8 figures. Is this one of the all-time miscalculations that you can think of? The guy's a billionaire. If he settles this case, he had the opportunity to before it ever went public. None of this probably ensues because the entire case seems to have been a roadmap based on that civil complaint. What a colossal miscalculation this was, especially because you already went ahead and settled it for $10 million or more the day after it was filed.
Yeah. Look, we don't know the backstory, and there almost certainly is one. I would suspect that in light of the blizzard of civil suits that resulted from his settlement with her, and it's just been a steamroller, it's been an ongoing thing. He may have decided that he was being blackmailed. And he may have said to himself, you know what, look, I just gave her 10 million. Now people that I said hello to in the street are coming after me for 10 million, alleging that I did something similar. And I have to stop here at some point and just say, you know what, I can't do it. I have to call BS because this could go on forever. And even a billionaire like me, I could be bankrupt. He didn't put out any music for a long time. He had put out a more recent album, and he was kind of like, the way I read it. And look, I don't follow hip hop real close. I don't think that's any shock to anybody, but even I was aware of the fact that he was kind of in the twilight of his career. He wasn't one of the more relevant names.
Yeah.
He had been at one point a real cultural icon. Those days were over, and so he may have taken a look at his money and had he was supporting 2, 3 houses. He may have said, "I can't do this indefinitely, and so I'm going to fight it tooth and nail." I'm not sure he ever saw it going like this, though, because I have a feeling that if he could have it back, he would. He certainly did not expect that HSI raid on his home in LA.
All right, Paul Mauro, great to talk to you as always. Thanks for chatting with us here about it. We'll have you back on as this thing progresses.
Thank you, guys. And listen, all of you out there, Fridays at 3, the Karen Reed case on Fox Nation. Tune in. We're covering a different case with a lot of lurid details as well. Hope to see you there.
Go check that one out for sure. Thanks, Paul. One
Thanks,
of our
guys.
VIPs, Diane, sent a wonderful message to us about preborn. She wrote, after hearing your promotion for preborn, my husband paid for 5 ultrasounds in my name for Mother's Day, the best gift I could imagine. Diane, we share that sentiment. Preborn is a nonprofit on a mission to save the lives of unborn babies. They know what they're up against, too, which is the ease of access to what's known as an abortion pill, or the marketing efforts of Planned Parenthood backed by federal government dollars. But despite that, Preborn does all they can to save lives day in and day out, and they've saved 350,000 unborn babies to date, and they have no signs of slowing down. Your support, though, makes all the difference. They entirely rely on you, the pro-life community. Preborn clinics operate based upon your donations. They welcome in mothers with love and support and give them a free ultrasound to start that process of letting them really know about the incredible and precious life growing inside them. And then it's so easy for that choice to be made for life. In 20 years' time, like I said, they've saved 350,000 babies. And it is a great gift to put in your name or someone else's name to donate to Preborn. 100% of your donation is tax deductible. To donate securely, dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250, say baby. 5 ultrasounds would be $140, and that was what was donated for Mother's Day for our wonderful VIP Diane in her name. Think about that. $140, you could save 5 babies. Or you can go to preborn.com/buck to donate. That's preborn.com/BUCK. Sponsored by Preborn.